A man pushes his torn heels against a rusted iron spike, scraping his shredded back against rough timber just to draw a single breath. The real question of this moment isn't just about the physical agony he endured. It's this: what exact document was he canceling in the dark? But there is a phantom debt that still haunts us. A haunting echo of the courtroom that most people never realize they are even carrying. We live in a culture fundamentally wired for commerce. You swipe a plastic card, the glowing terminal chimes, and a transaction is recorded. You punch a clock, track your hours, and wait for a direct deposit to hit your account. Every relationship, every interaction, every status we hold in modern society is subtly governed by the law of exchange. We earn what we get, and we pay for what we owe. Because this is the water we swim in, we subconsciously drag the exact same economic system into our spirituality. We hear the word Tetelestai. We nod at the theology of a canceled debt. We might even sing about it on a Sunday morning. But when the music stops and you sit alone in the quiet of your car, your body tells a completely different story. You feel the tightness in your chest when you fail. You feel the heavy, metallic weight of guilt settling in your jaw when you lose your temper or break a promise. We live haunted by a phantom debt. If you have ever paid off a massive loan, a mortgage, a medical bill, years of student debt, the physical relief of receiving that final letter from the bank. The ink on that paper legally changes your standing. The account is closed. Jesus was not offering a poetic metaphor for future theologians to debate in libraries. He was diagnosing something brutal and universally human. But imagine taking that letter of cancellation, folding it into your pocket, and continuing to mail a check to the bank every single month. Imagine waking up in a cold sweat, terrified that the collectors are coming, desperately trying to scrape together payments for an account that no longer exists. If you did that, the bank would literally return your money. To keep trying to pay a canceled debt is not an act of nobility. It is an insult to the cancellation. Yet this is precisely how most of us operate. We treat the cross as a down payment, rather than a final settlement. We act as if Jesus covered the principal, but left us responsible for the monthly interest payments of religious performance, self-loathing, and perfect behavior. We think if we just feel bad enough for long enough, we can slowly pay off the remaining balance. This exhaustion is not a sign of spiritual sensitivity. It is an argument with the receipt. When Jesus shouted Tetelestai, he was not opening a line of credit. He was closing the account permanently. But it is incredibly difficult for the human mind to accept a free ledger. We want to contribute. We want to earn our keep. We want to bring our own copper coins to the marketplace and prove we have worth. But there is a darker reason we struggle to believe the debt is cleared. To understand why we keep trying to pay, he was looking at a species drowning under a ledger they did not know how to clear, paralyzed by a debt that demanded their actual lives. You have to look at the entity actively trying to collect, because there is a very specific prosecuting attorney still walking the floor of the ancient courtroom, and his entire legal strategy depends on you forgetting what was nailed to the wood. Picture the scene in the ancient text of Job. A group of celestial beings gathers before the throne of God. The accuser walks in, the dust of the earth still on his sandals, clutching a heavy scroll. He paces the polished floor. He points an accusing finger. The Hebrew text gives this entity a very specific title, Hasatan. He is not a red cartoon with a pitchfork. He is a prosecuting attorney. His title literally translates to the adversary or the accuser in court, and his entire existence revolves around the ledger. He watches your choices. He tracks your missteps. He builds a meticulous case. He presents the undeniable evidence. The terrifying part of his strategy is that his evidence is usually accurate. You did break the promise. You did harbor the bitterness. You did compromise your integrity. He simply reads your own signed paragraphon back to the supreme judge. He points to the dark ink. He demands the payment. He insists that strict justice requires your life in exchange. But look at the legal mechanics of the cross. When Jesus shouts Tetelestai, the courtroom dynamic flips instantly. The iron spike drops. The parchment tears. The cross is not just an altar. It is an ancient courtroom. To understand the sheer magnitude of the word, he shouts from that wood. The ink is covered. The Apostle Paul describes the fallout of this exact moment in the very next verse of Colossians. After the certificate of debt is nailed to the wood, Paul says God disarmed the rulers and authorities and put them to open shame by triumphing over them in him. He did not just forgive the defendant. He disbarred the prosecutor. Without the certificate of debt, the accuser has absolutely no legal standing. You cannot prosecute a case when the evidence has been permanently stamped paid in full. You cannot collect a bounty that the judge himself has already settled from his own treasury. The transaction on the wood strips the enemy of his only real weapon. The accuser still stalks the edges of the courtroom. He still whispers in the dark. He still shouts your past failures. But he is holding a blank piece of paper. The condemnation you hear in your own head at 2 a.m. is not a legal summons. It is a bluff. He is desperately hoping you do not know the Greek language. He is hoping you have never seen the ancient papyrus. He is banking your entire spiritual paralysis on the fact that you will forget the single shout that echoed off the limestone walls of that quarry. Because if you remember the receipt, his voice loses all its authority. The legal battle is permanently over. You cannot start in a church. You have to step into the bustling, unforgiving marketplaces of the first-century Roman Empire. The prosecutor is disarmed. The ledger is entirely destroyed. But knowing the door is unlocked and actually stepping out of the stone cell are two very different things. The heavy iron door to the debtor's cell is standing wide open. But maybe the part that stays with me most is the papyrus itself. Not the abstract theology of forgiveness, but the physical, historical reality of a torn, weathered piece of parchment pulled from the dry sand of the Mediterranean, covered in the thick, dark ink of a satisfied creditor. It is the realization that someone else held the pen. We spend our entire adult lives trying to hold the pen. We try to write our own amendments to the ledger. We try to scribble out our failures with better behavior, more disciplined routines, or profound moments of manufactured guilt. We treat our spiritual lives like an active mortgage we are desperately trying to manage, terrified of the impending foreclosure. If you are in a season where the weight of your own ledger is crushing you, where the midnight accusations feel louder and more real than the promises of God, the cross is asking you to drop the pen. You cannot pay a debt that has already been bought. You cannot add to a document that has already been nailed through with an iron spike. The exhaustion you feel is real. Your body is carrying it in the tightness of your chest and the clenched muscles of your jaw. But it is the exhaustion of a prisoner. In the ancient Mediterranean world, debt was not an abstract concept floating in a digital bank account. It was intensely physical, sitting on a cold stone floor, anxiously counting copper coins in the dark. While the rusted gate to the street has already been kicked off its hinges, it is incredibly difficult to walk out into the light. Because the cell is what we know. The transaction of grace feels far too asymmetrical to the human mind. We want to owe something, because owing implies we still maintain a measure of control. If I owe you, I have a task to perform. But if the debt is entirely canceled by someone else's blood, you are stripped of your control. You are left with nothing but terrifying, unmerited gratitude. That is why Tetelestai is the most offensive word to human pride. It demands we bring absolutely nothing to the marketplace. Grace is not a payment plan you negotiate. It is a decree you finally accept. To actually step out of that stone room and believe, the ledger is completely clear. You have to stop looking at your own empty hands. You have to look back at the massive, sweeping scope of the story and trace the echoes of what happened when that single shout finally shattered the silence of the quarry. Sunday morning breaks over the limestone quarry. A heavy, circular stone is rolled back from a borrowed tomb. Inside, the air is cool, and the linen burial cloths are folded neatly on the solid rock floor. The man who absorbed the debt has walked out, leaving the empty cell behind. If you owed a landowner in 1st century Judea, the transaction was meticulously recorded on parchment or papyrus. Scribes used sharp reeds and thick carbon ink. We are a species desperate to clear our own ledgers. But the cross tells a completely different story. A laborer handed over his final copper coin, and a papyrus was stamped in dark ink. A man pushed his torn heels against an iron spike, and a legal decree was shouted into the dark. A Greek word left his bleeding lips, and the ledger of human failure was permanently closed. The handwritten record of our debt was carried to the execution site, and it was nailed directly to the wood. The metal tore through the parchment, and a public accusation became a public cancellation. The prosecutor walked into the courtroom, demanding his payment, and he found his evidence completely wiped clean. The rusted iron door to the debtor's cell was finally kicked off its hinges, and a captive species was invited to walk out into the light. One word, one transaction. But here is the part I keep coming back to. The receipt was not whispered in a temple. It was shouted from a cross for the entire Roman marketplace to hear. It is not a suspended sentence. It is a canceled debt. If you are in a season where you keep waking up in the dark, desperately trying to scrape together the copper coins of good behavior to pay for your past, it is time to look at the wood, scratching the exact amount of grain, silver, or labor you owed onto a document that could be rolled, sealed, and held against you in a magistrate's court. The account is closed. The accuser is holding a blank sheet of paper. You do not have to pay for a room that the judge has already unlocked. And may the God who nailed your condemnation to his own body give you the terrifying courage to believe the debt is actually gone and bring you out of the cell you have been living in. You could smell the drying ink in the heat of the agora, hear the clinking of Roman denarii passing between calloused hands. When a man could not pay his debts, the consequences were not a damaged reputation. He did not get a letter of warning in the mail. The Syrian sun is directly overhead, baking the limestone quarry outside the walls of Jerusalem. The air smells of sweat, copper blood, and the cheap, sour wine. He was dragged by the tunic into the public square. If the debt was large enough, you were thrown into a debtor's prison, a damp, lightless holding cell where you sat on a cold stone floor until your extended family could scrape together the copper coins to buy your freedom. If they couldn't, your reality changed permanently. You were sold as property. Your wife was sold. Your children were marched onto an auction block. Their bodies and future labor traded simply to satisfy the ink on that original piece of papyrus. Debt in the Roman Empire was not a financial inconvenience. It was a relentless, physical master. Every transaction, however, required an endgame. When a debt was finally cleared, the debtor did not just shake hands and walk away. They needed irrefutable proof. The creditor would take the original scroll, the one carrying the weight of a man's entire life, and they would write a specific legal decree across the face of the text. The new ink would dry directly over the old charges, neutralizing them permanently. Without that written cancellation, the debt still owned you. The ledger was not just a record of your past. It was a binding prophecy of your future. This culture of transactional precision extended violently into the criminal justice system. When a criminal was executed under Roman law, the courts required public documentation. A soldier just shoved toward his mouth on a sponge. Dust coats his throat. You can hear the low, rhythmic sobbing of a few women sitting, of the exact crimes committed. They would write the charges on a wooden board coated in white gypsum, painting the letters in stark red or black. This board, called a titulus, was hung around the condemned man's neck as he was paraded through the narrow, crowded streets of the city, the merchants covering their wares to avoid his blood, the children watching from the rooftops, and the soldiers barking orders. They all had to know exactly what he owed the state. When he reached the execution site, that same board was nailed to his cross. It was the ultimate public ledger. It announced to the world that a debt was being extracted in real time, paid out in torn flesh and suffocating lungs. This is the brutal, exacting world Jesus was born into. It is the only vocabulary of justice his first-century audience understood. And it is the exact framework the Roman governor Pilate uses when he orders a sign to be painted and nailed above the head of the carpenter from Nazareth. But the detail that changes everything is what happens to that public ledger in the final seconds of his life. A Roman soldier dips a sponge into a jar of cheap, sour pasca, the vinegar wine of the infantry. He shoves it onto a stalk of hyssop. He lifts it to the swollen lips of the man on the center cross, in the dirt near the base of the wood. He has been hanging here for hours, lungs collapsing, muscle cramping. Every syllable he speaks requires. Above the man's bleeding head hangs Pilate's board, the unalterable public ledger. The religious leaders had stood in the dust and screamed at the Roman governor to change the black ink on that white gypsum. They wanted the sign to say he merely claimed to be a king, but Pilate had refused. What I have written, the sign remains. The decree is public. The sky over the limestone quarry has been pitch black since noon. The air is thick, suffocating, completely still. You can hear the ragged, wet breathing of the 3 men dying on the wood. The flies buzz in the midday dark. The smell of copper blood and sweat hangs heavy in the heat. Jesus takes the bitter wine. The liquid moistens his cracked throat. He is not drinking to numb the pain. He is drinking to find his voice. He needs his vocal cords to work one final time. He pushes against the iron spike in his feet. Muscle tears. Bone grinds against rough timber. His chest expands as he pulls in the suffocating air. He has spoken 6 times over the last 6 hours. He forgave the soldiers throwing dice in the dirt. He promised paradise to the thief suffocating beside him. He secured a home for his weeping mother. He asked why the heavens had gone dark. A calculated, agonizing push against the metal in his feet. You've probably heard the story, or seen the scene recreated in movies. He admitted his physical thirst. 6 statements. 6 windows into a breaking heart. But the 7th statement is entirely different. The 7th statement is not about his pain. It is about your debt. John chapter 19. Verse 30 captures the exact moment the world shifts on its axis. The text reads, "When he had received the sour wine, Jesus said, 'It is finished.' And he bowed his head and gave up his spirit." It is finished. 3 English words. A period at the end of a tragic sentence. A simple announcement that the suffering is finally over and death has arrived. But John did not write his gospel in English. He wrote it in Greek. And in the original text, Jesus does not use a passive phrase. He does not use 3 words. He uses a single, explosive command. He forces the air out of his collapsing lungs, and he shouts one word that echoes off the rocks. It is a word the Roman soldiers holding the spears would have recognized instantly. It is a word the merchants passing by on the road would have used that very morning, but they would not have recognized it from a temple. They would have recognized it from the marketplace. The word translated in your English Bible as, "it is finished," is the Greek verb tetelestai. Most people assume the final words of Jesus of Nazareth are a gasp of resignation, a white flag waved at the religious leaders. It is a word you would rarely hear inside the walls of a religious temple, but you would hear it every single day, in the dust and noise of a Roman marketplace. It comes from the root word teleo, which means to bring a task to a close, to fully accomplish a mission, or to completely pay off a debt. And John records Jesus shouting this specific word in a very unique grammatical tense. He uses the perfect, passive, indicative. If you strip away the academic jargon, that simply means it describes an action completely finished in the past, but carrying a permanent, unbreakable result into the present. It does not mean it was finished and now it is over. It means it has been finished, and it will remain finished forever. To feel the weight of this word, you have to look at what archaeologists have pulled from the dry, arid sands of the Dakta, ancient Mediterranean, over the last century. Scholars have uncovered thousands of discarded commercial documents, tax receipts, property mortgages, and handwritten bills of sale. And across the front of these rough papyrus scrolls, scrawled in thick, dark ink by the hand of a satisfied creditor, is that exact same word, Tetelestai, paid in full. When a first-century laborer handed over his final copper coin to settle an overwhelming, a spiritual sigh of relief that the 6 hours of torture are finally coming to a close. And it does carry the weight of immense physical exhaustion. Debt. The creditor didn't just shake his hand and let him walk away. He took a sharp reed pen, dipped it in the inkwell, and wrote Tetelestai directly over the original charges. That ink guaranteed that no magistrate, no debt collector, and no Roman guard could ever knock on that man's door to demand payment again. If this realization that the original language completely changes how you read, the text is sparking something inside of you. You are exactly who this channel is for. Hit subscribe and drop a thought in the comments, because every week we dig beneath the English translations to find the bedrock of the Bible. So the man, bleeding out on the middle cross, is not just dying, he is doing accounting. The final breath of Jesus is not the cry of a martyr helplessly losing his life. It is the shout of a victor finalizing a cosmic transaction. When he pushes up on that iron spike and forces the air from his collapsing lungs, he is declaring that the spiritual bankruptcy of the human condition has been permanently canceled. The ledger has been stamped. The payment has been accepted. But to fully grasp the magnitude of the debt he was clearing in that dark quarry, you have to look at another piece of parchment. You have to. But if you look closer at the exact phrasing he chooses, at the singular Greek word that drops from his cracked lips before his chin hits his chest, you look at a document that the Apostle Paul says was literally nailed to the exact same piece of wood. The transaction did not end with the shout. It moved to the wood itself. Paul the Apostle, a man who understood Roman law as well as he understood the temple, provides the crucial lens for this moment in his letter to the Colossians. He writes of the spiritual transaction occurring in the unseen realm, saying that God has canceled the record of debt that stood against us with its legal demands. But notice the imagery he chooses. He says, God set this record aside, nailing it to the cross. Most people read this as a metaphor for forgiveness, a génal, poetic way of saying our sins were dealt with. But in the context of the Roman judicial system, the metaphor is terrifyingly literal. The chairographen, that is the technical Greek term Paul uses. It means a handwritten document, a certificate of debt, signed by the debtor's own hand. It was an admission of liability. It was a formal, legal confession that you owed something you could not pay. Every lie, every act of selfishness, every moment of divided allegiance you have ever committed was, in Paul's view, inscribed onto a document that you signed. Start to see something the traditional religious reading completely misses. The final breath of Christ is not a cry of defeat. It is a legal declaration. The ledger was not empty. It was a mountain of evidence. And in the silence of that black, midday darkness, the invisible reality of the cross was this. The Creator of the universe took every one of those signed certificates of debt and literally pinned them to the wood. He didn't just overlook the debt. He didn't just ignore the tally. He nailed the proof of your bankruptcy to his own body. Imagine the scene. The soldier drives the iron spike through the parchment. The ink smears against the grain of the wood. The signatures of your failures are now punctured, is torn, and obliterated by the same metal that is tearing through his own hands. The document is no longer a certificate of debt. It is a certificate of cancellation. The debt was not forgiven because it was erased from memory. It was forgiven because the cost was extracted from the only person with the authority to pay it. This is why Tetelestai carries such thunderous weight. It is not just the end of a life. It is the end of an accusation. When he shouts that word, he is not announcing his defeat. He is declaring that the document nailed to the wood, the ledger that should have held your name, your failures, and your eventual spiritual bankruptcy is now nullified, disstamped, and settled. The transaction is finished. The records are wiped clean.